Hi everyone, in this video we're going to be making Felicity's pumpkin pudding. And Felicity is a doll from around the time of the Revolutionary War, when we were fighting against England for our independence due to taxation without representation. And this time period is one that I was always really interested in when I was younger, to the point that when I was in high school I was a costume interpreter at a historic site near my house. So this is me in my outfit from that time period that I made along with my Mima, and I am using a loom that was at the site to weave the belt that I wore when I was at the site. I volunteered there through several years of my high school years and really loved working there a whole lot. So throughout this video, I'm going to be sharing a little bit about Felicity's story and how it connects, and some ways that we can learn from her story and the time period in general. So Felicity would have typically used a wood bowl, but I don't have one that is quite big enough. This is the one that my Mima used, especially to make chicken and pastry, but I realized pretty quickly that if I put all of these ingredients in there, it would have overflowed. So we're going to use a metal bowl, which this one belonged to my Mima as well. So you're going to crack 4 eggs into that bowl, and I'm cracking those on a flat surface just so that those shells don't go into the egg. And then you are going to use a fork to whisk those up, because that is more accurate. They would not have had a whisk at that point in time. And so we're just going to use a fork to beat up those eggs. During my time at the historic site, I did spend some time working in the kitchen. The kitchen was a separate building than the house, and that was not uncommon during that time period, because the kitchen was a lot hotter because it had a fire all the time, and especially during the summer months that would get very, very warm. And so that was usually a smaller little separate area, and then the house was separate from the kitchen. A lot of times they would start out with one place, and then as they were able to, they would build the second building. We now interrupt this program for a quick word from our sponsors. Oh wait, we don't have those. So while we're on the subject, just click that subscribe button, because we need as many subscribers as we can get. Thanks, y'all. So now we're going to mix about 1 pound of canned pumpkin in with a spoon. And once again, we're using a spoon because they would not have used a whisk at that point in time. In Felicity's time period and in the books throughout the stories, there were a few things that were a little unrealistic about what would have actually been allowed at that time. But one thing that was important about the American Girl books is that they used those as an opportunity to teach about the history of the time as a whole, and it didn't shy away from some of the more problematic things. But it's important for us to look back, because these books were put out in the 90s and we've learned a lot since then. And so I think one thing that we did not see during that time period was how colonialism affected the people that were already here, and there wasn't really any acknowledgement of that. And also, Felicity's grandfather owned a plantation, and it was not really addressed the uglier aspects of that. And so I think that's something that there could have been a better job of addressing within these books, for sure. And that was addressed in the Addie books, which came out significantly later than the Felicity books. But that's something that could have been addressed in addition to what was already being done. So we are going to add a few spices in here, and it's important to note that during that time period, spices were very, very expensive, so this would have been a pretty expensive addition. But a teaspoon of cinnamon, half a teaspoon of ginger, and a 1/4 teaspoon of allspice, and all of these would have been imported at that point in time, and probably pretty heavily taxed by the British. Then we're going to add a 1/2 cup of molasses, and that would have come from sugar cane as well, so that might have been imported. And so that would have come from a slave trade as well. And as I was reading through the books again as an adult, the other thing that I was noticing is they did do a good job of addressing how you can be friends with somebody that agrees differently than you. Because Felicity was friends with Elizabeth, who had different views than she did, and her grandfather had different views from her father, and they did a really good job of showing how that affected the family as a whole and how it could be different, but they made it work. So now we're just mixing up that well until all the chunks of the pumpkin are broken up, and making sure that molasses is dissolved and everything is incorporated. We have a lot to learn from children's books as a whole about getting along with each other and about treating each other well and making sure that we understand that everyone's viewpoints, if they do not infringe on others, are valid. And that's the most important part, making sure that we are not enforcing our own views on other people. So now we are just greasing up that pan with some shortening, and then we are going to bake this at 350 until the center sets. And you kind of know the center is set when you shake it, and the inside, it's going to jiggle a little bit, but it's not going to slosh. So reading these books as an adult is a little bit different than when you read them as a kid. When you're a kid, you kind of read them as an adventure story, and as an adult, you read them as a historic basis and understand the full context of things. And I encourage you, if you have these books sitting around, go back and read them, see how they affect you differently when you are looking at them as an adult, because we have a lot to learn from them now. And we can definitely understand how our presence here in the United States is fairly new in the historical context if we are white and if we are of European descent. And we need to understand that we are visitors here and that we have an impact on the people that were here long before us, and that we need to be respectful of anybody and everybody that we encounter. Thank you so much for joining me this week, and please subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this. Leave us a comment below about what your favorite books were, about any other books that you might have read growing up that had an impact on the way that you grew up and the way that you see the world, and we will see you next week.